Hi and welcome back to my channel, and also happy Halloween. So today I am back with another unsolved disappearance, and this is a case from the 70s which was dubbed the Fort Worth Missing Trio, and it's the case of three girls who vanished after an afternoon of last minute Christmas shopping at a mall in Fort Worth, Texas. So this case takes place on December 23rd, 1974 in Fort Worth, Texas. Mary Rachel Trilliker, who went by her middle name Rachel, was a 17-year-old girl, and she had an older sister named Deborah who was 19 and an 11-year-old brother named Rusty. Rachel was actually married. Even though she was only 17, she had recently been married to a man named Tommy Trilliker, and they had been married for 6 months. Strangely enough though, Tommy and Deborah, Rachel's older sister, were actually engaged for a while prior to their marriage, which is really odd, but apparently, according to Deborah, the relationship wasn't that serious and the engagement wasn't that serious, and she actually ended up moving in with her sister Rachel and Tommy because she was having issues in her new relationship. And although this looks and sounds really odd, apparently they all got along just fine and there was no hard feelings whatsoever. So on the 23rd of December 1974, Rachel woke up and decided that she wanted to finish some last minute shopping. So that is when she asked her sister Deborah if she would like to join her. But Deborah didn't really feel up to it, so she just declined and stayed home. That is when Rachel decided to call her friend, 14-year-old Lisa Renee Wilson, and she also went by her middle name Renee. The two were family friends and they had been friends their whole life. The families were quite close and they would regularly go out on family trips together, such as fishing and other outdoor activities. Renee also had a boyfriend at the time, and her boyfriend was 15-year-old Terry Mosley, and he actually gave Renee a promise ring, which symbolised the fact that their relationship was obviously going really well. So Rachel and Renee were both in really good relationships at this time. Renee said yes, and she wanted to go shopping as well, but Renee actually had a Christmas party that evening with her boyfriend, so she really wanted to be back for 4 p.m. So she agreed to go, but she insisted on being back at 4 o'clock so that she could get ready in time for this Christmas party. So Renee also asked Terry if he would like to go with them, but he declined as his friend was in the hospital from an accident, so he just said he's going to go see his friend, but he will see her later at the party. And that is when Terry's 9-year-old sister, Julie Mosley, overheard the conversation, and she was pretty bored, so she really wanted to join the two girls in going shopping. So she asked their mother if she could go, but her mother said no because she thought she was way too young and she didn't actually know Rachel, she only knew Renee. But after constant persisting, she eventually said yes and let Julie go. So at about 12 p.m. that afternoon, Rachel, Renee and Julie all set off, and Rachel was driving. So they went to the Seminary South Shopping Centre, which was located in Fort Worth, Texas, and they first visited an army store where Rachel was financing some items that she was later going to buy. They then parked in the upper parking lot outside of a Sears shop. So as I mentioned, Renee was very eager to be home for 4 p.m. because she had this Christmas party to go to and she was really excited. And so that is what they told the family. So when 4 p.m. rolled around and the girls didn't turn back home, the families began to get a little bit worried, but they decided to leave it until 6 p.m. because they figured that the girls may just be having fun and they might just be home a little later than promised. But 2 hours passed and the girls did not arrive home, and this is when the families set into a complete panic. So they decided to get in their cars and drive to the shopping centre. Now it was only a 10-minute drive, so it was literally up the road. So they thought, let's just go there and look for them. Maybe they've just got stuck on the side of the road, or Rachel's cars broke down. Just rational thinking, and they gave them the benefit of the doubt that they may have just got caught up or something happened. So they travelled to the shopping centre, and when they did, they found Rachel's vehicle parked at the Sears department store car park, and there was no sign of the girls in the vehicle, but the car was locked. And as they looked into the car, they saw a few bags of Christmas shopping in the back seat. So they were very confused, because it looked like the girls had gone shopping and then returned to the car to put the gifts down, but what happened after that is a mystery. So also, it was the 70s, so the girls did not have mobile phones, so it wasn't like they could just call the girls and see where they were. When you said you were going to be somewhere at a specific time, it meant a lot more back then, because it wasn't as easy as it is now to call someone and tell them you're going to be late or that you're not coming. So genuinely everyone stuck to what they said. So the families decided to go into the mall and physically check each and every shop to see if the girls were there. They also made an announcement on the shopping mall's telecommunications system to ask the girls to come to the front desk. So they searched the whole shopping centre, while Rachel's father waited outside near the car, and a few other family members who also waited there, because they wanted to see if anything would happen, if the girls would turn up at the car, or if anyone else would turn up at the car, to give them an idea of what may have happened. But unfortunately they were unsuccessful in their search for the girls. So at 11 p.m, that is when the families decided to call the police, and that is when they filed 3 missing persons reports. Initially, when the police got onto this case, they assumed one of 2 things, and that was either that the girls had met up with an acquaintance and had just gone off, as they do as teenage girls. So the police thought this could have been one option. The second option the police had is that the girls had ran away, and it's really shocking, but in a lot of cases, especially with young people, the first assumption from police is normally that they have run away, because obviously there is a tendency for teenagers to do this sort of thing, but it really doesn't work in their favour, because sometimes that's not the case and they have actually been met with foul play. But in this case, that is what they assumed, and alarms weren't really raised until a little while after. So it was Christmas Eve the next day, and there was still no sign of the girls. But what we do know is that the girls, or at least Rachel, returned to her vehicle because the Christmas presents were in the car. So they went back to the car, but what happened after that point is still a mystery. I also couldn't find any mention of CCTV anywhere, so I'm assuming it was because there wasn't any, maybe because of the 70s, I don't know, but there wasn't no CCTV of this car park, unfortunately. So it was Christmas Eve, the 24th of December 1974, and Tommy woke up and walked out to get his mail, and when he opened his mail he found a letter that was addressed to Thomas A. Trilliker. So Tommy opened this letter, and this is what the letter said. "I know I'm going to catch it, but we just had to get away. We're going to Houston. See you in about a week. The car is in the Sears car park. Love, Rachel." The return address was smeared, so they couldn't determine where the letter had came from. But Rachel's name had also been misspelled, or what it seemed like was misspelled, as her name was written, and then where the L is at the end, it almost looks like someone has put an E or an A and quickly changed it to a different letter. So it really looked suspicious that Rachel's name was incorrectly spelled. But the families immediately knew that this letter did not come from Rachel, because it was just so out of character that they went shopping on an afternoon and then randomly decided to go to Houston with a 9-year-old girl as well, 2 days before Christmas. It just didn't make sense to them, and they were sure this was not the case. So handwriting experts actually retrieved the letter and examined the letter, but the results came back inconclusive on the 3 times that they tried. Also, the fact that they had addressed it to Thomas A. Trilliker was really raising some alarms, because Rachel never called him Thomas. He was her husband, so she called him Tommy, and Thomas was just way too formal, and none of them ever called him Thomas. So this seemed like it really wasn't coming from Rachel. So the media were alerted and the case started to blow up, and the case was heavily publicised. Now, Rusty, Rachel's 11-year-old brother, was extremely affected by this. Of course, the whole family were, but this hit him particularly hard, and they had to sit and have Christmas without their sister around the table. But eventually tips started coming in, and witnesses from that day came forward. 6 months later, in 1975, a man came forward and said that he had actually seen the girls in the shopping mall on this day, and he was an acquaintance of Rachel's, and he said that he had a conversation with Rachel and the girls all seemed to be fine, but there was another person there. This has never been verified. Multiple store clerks also said that they saw the girls in the mall and they seemed to be in a very happy, joyous mood. But there were also multiple people who came forward with something a lot more sinister. Multiple people reported seeing several adult men forcing some girls into a van, and in particular one woman described seeing a yellow pickup truck near the grocery store outside of the mall, and she saw 3 girls being forced in. In 1981, a man came forward and said that he saw a young girl being forced into a car, but he actually interrupted this and asked what was going on, and the man in question replied saying that this was a family matter and to stay out of it, so the man did. Then a former police officer and security guard at the shopping centre that year came forward, and his name was Bill Hutchins. Now, Bill Hutchins said that he was working that night on the 23rd, and at around 11:30 p.m. he saw a security guard that he didn't know, and they had a bit of a verbal altercation, and it's unclear as to what was said, but they had a bit of an altercation, and when Bill approached his vehicle to look more closely at the man, he saw a pickup truck and inside were 3 girls. Now, he was very specific about the seating arrangements of these girls and gave quite a lot of detail about the girls and how they were sitting and what they were wearing. He also said that they were smiling and laughing, so he didn't become too suspicious. Now, he reported this sighting in 1974, so that year, but police actually didn't follow up with him until 2001. So a lot of crucial time had passed, but when they eventually did follow up with him, they said that they located this particular man and he denied any involvement of the girl's case, and then this was dropped by authorities. So days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, and there was no sign of the 3 girls. The family got tired of the police effort, so they actually turned to hire a private investigator, and his name was John Swain. He received a tip that the girls were buried in Port Lavaca, which was a county in Texas. So he decided to round up 100 volunteers who searched the bridges and the waters around the bridges, but no trace of the girls were found. But then in 1979, John Swaim suddenly died from a drug overdose, which was ruled a suicide. And in his will, he requested that all the files on this case be destroyed, which is really, really odd, but we don't really know why this is. But that's what he requested, and that's what happened. The case stayed open for years and search efforts continued around Texas for years, but unfortunately all the leads that came through turned into dead ends and the family were left with their missing family members. So as I mentioned earlier, Rusty in particular was extremely affected by his sister's disappearance. He was 11 years old at the time and he carried this pain with him through to his teens and his adulthood, and he's never been the same since. As he got older, he devoted all of his spare time to finding his sister. In the late 90s, he hired a man named Dan James, who was also a private investigator, and it turns out that Dan James had been following the case for years and was very familiar with it. He had a huge interest in the case, so he was more than happy to help Rusty. And he exhausted every single lead, every single rumour that he was given. Everything that anyone said, no matter how significant, he followed through with it. As recent as 2018, Rusty decided to devote his time to Benbrook Lake, which was about 8 miles from the Seminary South Shopping Centre. And he done this because this was a large lake and it was close to where the girls went missing, and a lot of the tips that they received were regarding this lake. So he received an anonymous tip that the girls could be buried in this lake. So he put all his time and effort into searching this lake, and he actually detected 3 cars at the bottom of this lake using sonar technology, which is basically a technology that you hold over the water and it detects any large items in the water. So he organised a 4-person dive to retrieve the vehicles and search. The first 2 vehicles that they retrieved gave no evidence as to where the girls were. There were no bodies of the girls found. But with the 3rd vehicle, when they got to the bottom of the lake to retrieve it, the car started to fall apart, literally. So they decided to not take it up to shore because they would probably lose a lot of the parts of the car, which could potentially have some evidence in. So they decided to search this vehicle underwater, but these lakes were described by divers as black water. It was completely black in the lake, so it was really, really hard to look and search in the water. But eventually they did, and nothing in regards to Rachel, Julie or Renee was found. So now let's get into some theories. So most of the family and the police all came to the conclusion that they believed that the girls were abducted, and they thought specifically abducted by someone they knew, because there is no way that the girls would just decide to leave Rachel's car and just take off with a complete stranger. Rachel was 17 years old and she had a 9-year-old little girl with her, so there's no way she would have just taken off with a random stranger. Also, the fact that they ran away seems extremely unlikely. It was a few days before Christmas and Julie was just 9 years old, so she was still very much in that kiddie Christmas mood, and there's no way she would have just left all her presents and gone off with a stranger or left on her own accord. They also had no clothes with them and they just came with the bare necessities to go shopping with. So the fact that they just took off and went to Houston is basically been outruled. So this points to the idea that it was someone they knew, and not just knew but trusted, because it would make sense that they may have gone off with someone they knew and trusted because they knew them. And then there is the theory that Rusty himself had for quite a while that Deborah may be involved. Now, if we're looking at this in terms of who had a motive, it was Deborah. She was the sister of Rachel, who was recently married to the man she was engaged to. So it's obviously a very close call. So if there was a motive, it would be Deborah, and Rusty thought this for quite a while, and their relationship became quite strained because of this. But I believe that now he realizes that Deborah didn't have anything to do with it. But it is an interesting thought to look at. It's just one of them really, really sad cases. A few days before Christmas, 3 young girls who had their whole life ahead of them, and there's just no answer to this 45 years later, and we are no closer to finding out what happened. I also forgot another theory could be the security guard. So it could have been someone who dressed up as a security guard and maybe offered them a ride somewhere else, and they trusted him because he was a security guard. And that would explain Bill Hutchins' encounter in the car park. And it also seemed like he didn't know this security guard. So I don't know, maybe they were on different shifts, or maybe he actually dressed up as a security guard and took advantage of the girls by doing this. As I mentioned, Rusty is still to this day searching for his sister and hopes that one day some light will be shed on what happened to her. Rachel and Rusty's mother, now 80 years old, puts 3 angels on her lawn every Christmas to symbolise the missing girls. The girls would be over 50 years old today. So that's the end of this case. It's a very sad one, as they all are, but I'd be really curious to see what everyone thinks. Do you think they were abducted by a stranger? Do you think that they left on their own accord? What do you think happened? I'm really eager to see what you have to say, because it's just one of them cases that it seems like there's an obvious answer, but how has this not been discovered? How do we not know what happened all these years later? Very, very sad. But I hope you enjoyed this case. If you would like to request any particular cases, then please comment down below. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.